The second one I want to touch on is Frequal-izer, this one over on the top right. Frequal-izer got its name because it's an FIR, finite impulse response equalizer. It has no phase shift, absolutely zero, and it has the cleanest frequency response of any FIR EQ that I measured, and I spent 3 months measuring everything to make sure that our parameters beat everything that was out there. You can draw a curve just with the mouse to do anything you want, and then once you've drawn something, and usually I personally get silly when I'm trying to figure something out. Well, I need some more bottom end, and that's okay, and I need some more high end. Yeah, well, that's the idea, but it's a little over the top. So I can do two things here. I can smooth the curve so it's not as radical, and I can scale it down. Well, that's the right idea, but I just did it too much. Or, that's the right idea, I didn't do it enough. Notice I'm getting off the top here. You can change the scale so that you can see what you're doing. And zoom in so you can get very accurate if you're just doing a little bit of high frequency EQ on a final mix, for instance. You can split this also in left and right. Let's say I'm doing some EQ and, well, gee, that sounds good on the left channel, but not on the right channel. I can now unlock the two, select the right channel, and change the EQ, but look, it didn't affect the other channel. Now I can go on going, okay, yeah, that's good. Now I want to go back to doing both. I can then click on weak connection between the two channels. Now if there's something I notch here, it does both channels, but look, it's relative. I just took a notch down here, 3 dB, and it made the left channel down 3 dB, but it didn't make them the same. They stayed relative based on the split that I did before. Another thing that I like to do is when I'm trying to find a note that I want to get rid of. There's a note actually sticking out. It's too loud, and I'm trying to figure out where it is. So I'll accentuate it even more. So it's going bing, 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 bing. Okay, that's it. Hit invert. Now it's taking exactly the frequency that I found and inverting it. So you can get rid of it, and then you can do the same thing. Scale it down, smooth it out. Another feature is a learning feature. It has, when it's operating, it'll show you an RTA of either the input or the output, left channel, right channel. So you can have 4 things in there: left channel, right channel in, left channel, right channel out. Or you can, turn them off. Let's look at just the input, but you have complete RTA there. If you change the frequency response and you have output, well, look, you can see where the output is following this new frequency response curve. In the learning zone, this is being used a lot of post-production houses in Los Angeles where they're taking, for instance, The Sopranos. They're releasing all the old episodes for syndication. They want to replace all the bad words. So they have the actors come in and go, that mother jumping, whatever, and they don't sound exactly the same because it's now 4 or 5 years later and they're trying to replace the stuff. So they use the learning feature, hit match, hit learn. Now it's going to learn the spectral content of the source. Now you go and put the cursor on the destination and put the cursor on the destination and learn the destination. And when you're done, you hit stop. It gives you the frequency response difference to make them match automatically. Usually things that modify that are if you're doing it for music, like you mixed a bunch of songs for your album, but the single you mixed 6 months ago for the record company at some other studio and it has to go in the album, so it has to match. You can go in and change the spectral content so it more matches the rest of your mixes. if there was, you know, lots of hi-hat in one mix but not the other, those things you're going to have to listen to, and you might have to scale that down. This tells you empirically what the differences are, but then you can just scale it down, but it gives you a great head start and go in the right direction. So that also works well if you're doing compilation albums. You have a bunch of tunes for a bunch of different albums, and you kind of want to make them sound the same. This also will take care of level difference. So if the target needed to be brighter but also 3 dB louder, this whole curve will be offset up 3 dB. Now with good FIR EQ, if you take all the frequencies and turn them up 3 dB, you get exactly the same results as if you had just turned up the volume 3 dB. So that's how smooth this kind of EQ is. All of the EQs have 2 workspaces. Here you'll see A, B. I can copy this to workspace B, then I can make some other changes, and then I can just A-B back and forth between those 2 workspaces, and then save whichever one I want. RTAS has this built in, this feature with a compare, but VST doesn't, so it's all built into each individual EQ. On to dynamics. Down here in the lower left corner is Finis. Finis is a brick wall limiter, but it's an intelligent brick wall limiter. You know, if you've looked at waveforms, if something goes above 0 or has been brick wall limited, it's just flattened out at the top. All the high frequencies go away. The high frequency overtone's missing for a second, or what give you the impression that it's been limited to death. This keeps all the high frequency information, and it also has really good look ahead, so it can see the peak screaming for being over 0, and it'll start changing its ramp ahead of time to make sure that it's rounded out, but it makes it low enough so it keeps all the high frequency information will fit inside the curve. You'll notice that on its display here, 0, that 0 is 0. That's as high as you can go in digital. But what this does is it actually makes an additional scale model of what you're trying to limit in a 48-bit workspace, and so it can tell how loud over 0 it would have been. If I turn this up, I can get the input. Let me go to, I can turn this up, and you can see where these peaks would have been 8 dB over 0. A regular meter can't tell you that. It just stops at 0. So you keep turning it up, it won't get any higher than 0. And here's my brick wall on the bottom set at 0. And here's the amount of attenuation that's happening. We also offer a thing called the crest factor meter, which looks at the dynamics of the signal. It looks at the RMS value versus the peak value and looks at a ratio between them. You can see here that the input has got an 18, which is a mastered record. That's about what the dynamics ratio is, 18. As you take more of the dynamics out, this meter reads lower and lower. You can see the output is reading around 12. And this little pink bar shows the difference between the 2. So a very highly limited hip-hop record that's 4,000 dB above 0 would be 6 or 4 or something, no dynamics at all. A Diana Krall record might be 20 or 24, lots of dynamics. So you can actually see how well you're doing, or what you're actually doing in the limiting area. You can also just use this meter to play different things. If you're doing like a Huey Lewis kind of record, so you can put up Huey Lewis records and see how much they compress that. They did it about 18, 20, something, 8, 12, whatever it is. You go, oh, okay. So then when you're working on your mixes, you can compress them so it has kind of the same amount of compression as the Huey Lewis or whatever kind of thing that you're trying to emulate. And it works as a good guide for that. You can also change the hold times with this little button on the right. And you can see instantaneous numeric readouts of the peak, the amount of attenuation, and you see your out levels because I have them set here at 0. They're just showing 0. This, because it's an intelligent limiter with more features inside than just threshold and input, we give you a control called reaction, which changes up to 5 parameters inside dynamically through a lookup table, so they're not all necessarily moving in the same direction when you move this control. So they're just all mapped to one control, so you can make the limiting be harder or softer. And there's 3 different algorithms for different types of music. Ballads or smooth records would be type 1, more up-tempo things leading into rock would be type 2, really upscale hard rock or hip-hop would be type 3. There, some of the controls, like release control, have to be done automatically inside, because it's not something that you can even hear the difference with. It has to be controlled by the computer because of the radical amount of limiting it's doing, so it completely grays that out. So you just listen to those, and not necessarily, you know, this is what I use for a ballad, depending on the music content of what you're doing. You know, type 2 might be good for some, you know, Latin ballad or something. So you have to listen to those and decide, and there you go. And you can easily get 6 dB louder out of something, and it doesn't sound like the top was chopped off of it.